Hi Shruti, welcome to Misfits. Thank you
Hi,
very
Manjari.
much for taking out time. I'm super excited for this session with you.
Yeah, same here. Thanks for inviting me.
Perfect. Shruti, why don't you begin with your startup journey in terms of? I'm very curious about why did you decide to start up in the first place? Why did you decide to become a founder?
Right. So my background is so I trained as an engineer at IIT Delhi. Graduated from there, like now maybe 7, 8 years ago. Went to Bain Company, spent 2 years over there. I think like what got me interested in investing and into eventually like starting up was that I came across a lot of like micro entrepreneurs, right? So like dealership owners or like owners of small factories, owners of small knitting factories during my journey over there, and I could see that they had like a lot of these like what I considered simple issues. So we all know about like the credit access issue, but also things like using software, using like billing, inventory, accounting software that is like suitable to their needs. So I think that's when I started to see that SMEs in India are not super efficient right now, and I was very interested that how do you make it better. Then I went to Omidya Network, right? So for 3 years I worked over there in impact investing, and there of course I had like a lot more time and a lot more structured ability to think about like how can like entrepreneurship in India grow. And so then I went to HPS. I was always interested in starting up. So I used my time at HPS to actually explore, like different business sectors. So I came back to India during my summers. I worked on, so again, like I did a part of my coursework trying to start my own company over there. And the idea was, like it's a risky part of my life, right? It's a, you take a break from your career, you're paying a lot of like loans. It's a risky part of my life, but I felt, it's already risky, and why don't I just like like add some more risk to it and see what the outcome is. I also saw that during my time as an investor that there's a lot of questions I had about why can't you do things X way or why can't you do things Y way, but I hadn't done those things. So like for example, I was asking someone, why is your CAC going up, what can you do to control this. I had never worked as a like as a founder or even in marketing myself to try and like figure out why do things go up or down. So I used to feel that I want to be an operator, right? Even if I do eventually end up coming back to finance. So because of all of these reasons, and because again like Harvard has like a just like a huge community of really talented people, and then when you see so many interesting people who've done these interesting things, you end up asking yourself, hey, what am I waiting for, right? And then so that's kind of like how I took the plunge.
Got it, got it. And how do you see your startup journey so far? How has it panned out for you? And if at all, I mean, gender has played any role in shaping it up?
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, I think like my startup journey has been pretty tumultuous, right? So I think I came back to India in 2019 from HBS, and I went into starting. I started up immediately, and the first like so initial like struggle was kind of just like the normal startup struggle, finding a co-founder that like whose values and wavelength vibe with you, putting a good enough team together, raising the first set of funding. I think like over there, like there was like I think gender started playing somewhat of a role over there. So look, on the one hand, I am kind of like very aware that I'm enormously privileged. So because of like like having gone to IIT and then like having worked where I did and then like having gone to HPS, I think a lot of like funding doors were like definitely open to me, right? So uh, getting meetings was like not like really the issue, and also equally like I had this like network of friends who were already into startups. So a lot of them would tell me like so there's like this thing that like no one wants to fund travel in India really, because no one has made money in travel in India so far, as it goes. And so I got this advice early on, like why do you want to travel, it's एक तो service business hai, it's got these issues, funding नहीं होगा, इतना hot नहीं है, सोच लो, why do you want to do this. So I got, so again I got like a lot of the advantage of being part of like this kind of like very entrepreneurial network, and also like a very privileged network. And then there was the, on the gender part, I definitely faced like a some amount of, I would say, like nonsensical inquiry, right? So I think the kind of conversation you have with like your investors or investor candidates, I'd say, can be like sometimes different. Also people I think are, back then at least, we're not as used to like women founders and women CEO founders. And I think somehow the perception, if you're like a woman CEO founder, then like your sector should be like like a woman CEO wala sector. Maybe I should like go into fashion or like something. And like it's fine, like maybe as a consumer I have an interest in a few things that I don't think like like I don't think like people are asking men, who are like leading jewelry companies, how will you run jewelry? But they definitely seem to think that, if you're a woman founder, why don't you go for these like women opportunities? Which I found like, frankly, kind of like just like bizarre. And then, of course, like some things just outright sexist, right? So like this, like very famous like angel investor like gave feedback, that like, oh, I worked with someone who was from an Ivy League, and she started up and she couldn't do it. So I don't think that like there's a fit over here. And I was like, boss, like you must have made like 100 investments. As you don't seem to fund too many women, like clearly a lot of them would have been to men. Are you really telling me that none of the men failed at anything? Aapka kya record if like all the men like cracking it out of the park raha hai, and that's why the men keep getting funding? It's obviously not true. So somehow it's like, if a woman fails somewhere, there's such an extraordinary burden on the next woman. Ki, Are, how are you not like her? But
Hmm.
like we are just entrepreneurs. There's no male or female about it.
Yeah.
So take a look at my energy, at my work, at my vision, at who I've brought together. But I think like there, you don't get the same deal as like maybe like a male peer would.
Right. And how well you're able to handle this in your organization itself.
Yeah, so I think like I actually wish we had a lot more women at Apna Club than we do, and we like we are probably like better than like other startups. I know a lot of startups which are just like men, but I think overall India में female workforce participation ही बहुत कम है, right? So like there's very few women who are working, and then there is so much pressure on all of these women as we keep kind of like going ahead, right? So like as you get older and like there's a pressure on you to like have family, take care of the family, and it's not just children, right, but also like parents. So elder care, like home care, all of this kind of like seems to fall disproportionately. I think there are fewer women candidates that we see at the top of a funnel itself, right? So if I if there's like a job post which I'm looking for, I don't think as many women are available. And then like if you come to retail, so I think like where you have talent which has been nurtured somewhere else, then some of the talent wants to move to like startups, right? So I find that very challenging. I think retail as an industry does not have too many women.
Hmm.
I think like companies like Best Price, old Walmart, right? They did some really like interesting initiatives, so they have nurtured some talent. So when we are lucky, we get some of those folks. But otherwise, it's been really challenging at Apna Club to get like people. And then of course we're a retail company, right? Like we're a distribution company. So we have like 600 people across the ground. Very few people who are able to kind of like like join us at the grassroots level. But yeah, I mean, I'm also like I'm also pretty like happy that I think like over time definitely women come into it. So for example, when our warehouse used to be in this old kind of like settled part of like the warehouse industrial area, there would be like a group of women who would also like come. They were our picker packers, like like and helping with the delivery setup. And so they were there. But then when we moved to like a newer cluster, right, जहाँ पे उतना culture नहीं था, like सिर्फ I think 3-4 साल से वहाँ पे like काम चल रहा था, and this warehouse was new. वहां पे then we struggle to get any women workers, right? And then फिर वहां पे ये like ground level issues. There aren't like two separate toilets.
Hmm.
There isn't an expectation that need to have like one separate toilet for someone. And then of course the government's restrictions are there on like what kind of safety setup you need to have for like women workers. So I think we run into some of that in the newer areas.
Right. And how does your customer base look like in terms of the split?
Yeah. Again, I think like surprisingly like all male. You get like the odd like female like retailer. I'm sure there must be like a lot of them who are helping in the stores, right? So like there's this shift system. तो family की within ही shift चलती हैं. तो उसमें जाकर के आप बैठ जाते हो साथ में. But
Right.
very typically, I think again like women in India are not encouraged to handle money,
Hmm.
right? And as a retailer, like that cash or that galla is very important. So वो तो आपको संभालना ही है, right? So I think like but yes, there'll be like there are examples where we know like we have our customers who are like female retailers. I think Gurgaon side, Haryana side ज़्यादा हैं.
Okay.
But yeah, like but I think like on a broad level, like out of 100 maybe one or two women retailers, otherwise like largely male. And that also makes it like तो largely male customers हैं, फिर largely male workforce हो जाती है.
Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense. ठीक है. So let's just then maybe start with little bit about Apna Club. And can you take us through the B2B wholesale market in terms of what are its dynamics, key players,
Right.
their motivations, etc.
Yeah, so to kind of like give a little bit of context to this, right? I think like B2B tends to be a very different kind of play to compared to B2C, in the sense that like there's two things that are very different over here. One is like like your process of selling. So I think with consumers, you can have obviously like a much more of a like, here is our value promise and here is our like like philosophy, and this is why you should like use us, right? And you can appeal to a person's values much more easily. So you'll see it, right? So Adidas is like the fashion sneaker, and Nike is like like the athletic, no limits mindset sneaker. So agar aap waise ho, if you're that kind of person, then buy Nike. Now in B2B it tends to be like all very like like value driven, transactional, right? So here's the best price, here is the lowest ad, here's the best credit like limit. And then unfortunately, like if anyone makes a promise, then the entire sector becomes about like like a race to like like what's the best promise. Um so so I think like so in that way I think marketing for B2B, appealing and creating a base of customers, again all of these have been like very different journeys. The second part is like, I think because Apna Club is again a very like vernacular or like a India 2, India 3 kind of company. We only work in like non-metro cities, and we work like largely in the Hindi speaking belt of India. I think the kind of technology you have to build, the kind of like like product experience you have to have is very different from like everyday life. So for me, right, like when I look at the B2B FMCG wholesale sector, I think the first thing that like you have to understand is that it's about $100 billion. It's very unorganized. It's very efficient and very unorganized, right? So unorganized in the sense that a brand will not know like what the performance of the SKU or pricing is in these markets. Like literally, you take like you take some very famous tea brand or some very famous talcum brand, and they've been in India for ages, and you'd think they would of course know how to distribute, where to sell. They must have everything like set up already. They don't, and they can't. And the reason is that in India, if you have like two geographies where like if basically you as an area sales manager try to tweak prices too much, right? Aapne, if you give a 3% discount on this, like let's say talcum powder which is not selling, then immediately what will happen is ki this talcum powder will be carted very efficiently from where it's not selling to where it is selling, where that 3% discount will be used to undersell your stable existing market. So again, so as I said, right, like it's a very unorganized market, very data dark. Like it's completely like like in many ways built on information asymmetry, right? So one player knows like the brand, another player knows like who's buying, then there's like people connecting them. So but there isn't like one unified chain that is linking things. So within this, what we are trying to do is we're creating a modern wholesale channel, right? We are saying that like there are progressive retailers in India. There are people who want to give better consumer service. They don't want to buy from traders. They want to buy directly from brands because that's better quality, lower counterfeits, lower damages. They want to give more choice to the consumers, right? So today, like consumers are seeing ads everywhere, right? But the supply chain has not caught up to it. So you're seeing 10 shampoos in your like advertisement feed, but in your like shelf of the store there's only like two or three. So we
Right.
see all of these issues cropping up in this part of India. So about 40 to 50 billion of India like lives in this like unorganized and like trader supplied zone. Now we want to work with these traders and these retailers to just like connect them directly to brands for better goods, fair pricing, and kind of like much greater customer choice.
Right. So, in that case, then, what are the key things, like top two things or three things that kind of seal the deal with the retailer? Uh, is it
Right.
price, or is it reliability of delivery?
It's
What?
everything, right? Like I think like most B2B like services, having, so again like the promise, right? Or like having like four or five value drivers is kind of like hygiene. So you have to have reliable delivery, you have to have multiple payment options, you have to have like good business intelligence, you have to have fair assortment, you have to have good pricing. But in distribution you are not a manufacturer, right? So pricing can't be, you can't. So again, B2C, typically there's a lot of discounting that happens because people hope that that you're cutting out a lot of intermediaries, and so so you'll be able to kind of like squeeze value out. Now in B2B you're not cutting anyone out as a intermediary, right? You're saying this value chain makes sense, it works, let us make it more efficient. So you can't offer these discounts to the consumers, right? And again, I think what, so even the kind of discounts that, B2C channel offers to customers is typically within the band of, the retailer margin, as it's called.
Hmm.
Now, when we are working with B2B, pricing is not something that we are trying to like improve on. We are not manufacturing. We are not going to do some innovation in packaging or, materials which will lead to like a reduction in cost. So we don't like interfere with the price. The price is set by brands. Within that, we say, how do we ensure, like your marketing happens well in the sector? How do we ensure that you have, like, very reliable delivery? How do we ensure you're working with the right set of customers? See, even in retailers, there are, like, very progressive, very ambitious, very growth minded like retailers. How do you find them and connect to them? So that is, so again, that philosophically, that the hard work that we have been doing is picking out these progressive retailers and saying, if you're a new brand, like let's say, you are a D2C brand, first of all, to, like, you have to have like a mass value proposition. Other time, I think startups in India don't have a proposition for, like the 250 million mass middle income of India. So one, if you have the right value and price proposition for the customer, how do I help you without like capex, without, like glitches, without inventory issues, without damages, without counterfeits, without like, like unnecessary like marketing costs? How do you like reach your customer everywhere? That's the promise you're trying to fulfill.
Got it. So you're setting up your own infra, or you're kind of banking on the existing supply infrastructure and kind of then delivering the goods.
Right. So we are very asset light. So we manage everything ourselves. So it's full stack management, but it is like all, like rentals, or it's leased equipment, so to say.
Got it. So in that case, also, let's just say if the retailer buys directly from the wholesaler versus they are buying from you, still, I'm assuming that the number of steps that it takes for, let's just say, the supply, the goods to get to the nearest wholesaler, there would still be multiple steps involved, right? So then, are you not able to cut down steps there, just for understanding?
No, I think, like, India's like, see, again, like the supply chain is like much more complex, right? It's not as simple key, brand, intermediary, retailer, and humne intermediate, like we remove the intermediary, and now suddenly there's like a lot of like value unlocked. These intermediaries are like, accurately forecasting inventory for you. They're supplying working capital and expecting, like only like a 1.5% return on it. If you do this kind of like unsecured lending, right, and you try to raise money from the capital markets for it, you won't get it that easily.
Hmm.
Collections is such a huge issue, so ensuring you don't have bad debts, you're collecting the money all the time. Damage is not an issue. So your intermediary so of course, like intermediaries in most channels and most, like, value chains have, like, like different benefits that they give. In India supply chains case, right, it depends on who you're talking about. We think that, if there is like a intermediary who's sitting in these like geographic areas, providing that warehousing area, providing that capital, providing that service of, like, like last mile drop off, then I think this is an intermediary that we want to work with and like grow, right? So you're and again, I think it's again like it's a myth, right, that the problem in like this part of, like supply chain is not about, too many intermediaries. It's very specifically because brands pay less to general trade than they do to modern trade. So to us, it's about like helping brands understand that the value adding packs that they have, all brands, all manufacturers have like some SKUs which, drive like customer appeal, but they're usually moderately priced, right? You're not like trying to get like some 30% out of them. Then they're innovative products, right? Like, so there's like a better tea blend, or there is like a specific, like, like shampoo with a quality, and that is a niche market. If you get that customer that product, they will be loyal for life. So there is some value to be had over there. So what we are saying is that that value is not being captured today, and the way to capture that value is to actually have the data oversight, right? So by pin code, by shop, who is selling what, can you supply like so many cans of this, like hair oil over here, actually should you be supplying this price point or this, like, ml quantity? So these are things that we want to like help with. I mean, the issue isn't so much that there are too many intermediaries. The issue is that, people don't know what will do well in this area. Will you
Got
be able to sell, like let's say bubblegum flavor in this area? So that's what we try to solve.
Got it, got it. And so somewhere you're trying to build a data layer that helps you capture the demand of, let's say, different SKUs that are primarily selling in a particular area and are profitable, right?
Yes.
Uh, so then, does it also lead to some sort of a fear in these retailers that tomorrow, because you now have better understanding about the demand, then how does their relevance remain established from a you as a player, and then of course there are other players also in the market.
Yeah.
So specifically, let me just take an example from so I belong to a village which is very close to Nepal border, and in the
Right.
last 2 years, to my delight, the delivery services have been really solved very well, in the sense
Mhm.
that people are able to now order these white goods, like they're ordering fridge, microwaves,
Right.
etc., to their home. Delivery time is still not solved. Of course, it's not
Sure.
as good as you would get in Gurgaon or Delhi. It
Yeah.
takes about 4 days or 7 days, but still does happen. So then, how do you for FMCG products? How do you kind
Yeah.
of solve that? And if at all that fear may, I don't know whether it
Yeah.
is arising or not. If at all, if it is arising, how do you handle that?
So two things, right? Like, I think like one, there was a lot of investment that went into supply infrastructure like over the last few years, which is now going to go away. So one, I think like some of these areas will go back into the dark again, right? You won't have as easy deliveries, you won't have as easy accessibility. एक तो वो है. Because frankly, a lot of things have been done like at kind of like at a current stage of like loss. So a lot of that will change. Second thing, as I understand, the question is, do the retailers fear that we will replace them? Is that the question?
Yeah,
I mean, retailers, yeah, so like take it like this, right? Like you are probably willing to wait like 7 days to 10 days to a month, right, to get the right microwave, right? And you want the best deal and the best quality and everything on it, sure. It's also a durable good, it'll last you a few years, right? So it's a very different kind of purchase. When you want toothpaste, you want it now, you want it like like ho gaya, right? Like on and then in urban India you can see the phenomenon create like like going towards the 10-minute delivery thing. I don't think you need 10-minute delivery today. So there's always an economics to everything, right? But people want certain goods which are frequent use in the moment of need. That moment of need for grocery is, and for FMCG branded goods is small. So it's not going to be like like people will wait like like 3 days or
yeah,
2 days or even one day for these deliveries. Beauty products, right? Again, there's a whole thing to touch and feel on it. Either we go to that, we redo that like 10-year cycle that we did in like urban parts of India, right? Jam where people order and then they return, they order and they return, which is not a great, economic model for anyone. Or we go to an omni-channel method, right? Which is like to understand ki if something needs touch and feel, then you need to have presence, right? It's as much a marketing and, kind of like mind space investment as it is actually about like delivery. And then when it comes down to it, I don't think retailers have anything to fear, because India ka real estate is like owned by a lot of these kirana store owners, right? So within like every settlement of India, there is like someone who owns that space and is an entrepreneur willing to work for that, like that profit is their like income. Now you replace that with a structure where like there's a company and you're paying salaries and you're paying rent and you're paying like like kind of that premium for like learning and building up your understanding over there. I think all of these are inefficiencies, like fairly speaking. And so if you can get the existing retailer who is willing and hardworking and wants to like progress, as I said, you get that person and you build a network of them. I think that's a much more like relevant way of solving this problem, rather than trying to like say, okay, we'll create like this overarching corporate structure which will have like 10 clones everywhere. And by the way, the 10 clones is very dispiriting, it is soulless. And people prefer convenience, assortment and great pricing. But if they can get convenience, assortment and great pricing with soul, then that is what they will go for.
right. Fair enough. Fair enough. And how does it work with the bigger brands like FMCG brands? Are you cracking partnerships with them, or what are the key drivers there? The reason I'm asking this is because there are these traditional systems that are already in place, because it's a very very old industry, right? And there are these recent players also that have come in, and these are like reasonably well funded
Mhm.
companies. So how are you kind of positioning yourself amongst this entire context?
Right. So, and like we obviously get compared to our like competitive field like quite often. And I think there's two or three things that are very different. One, I think most people in this industry are working across multiple channels, right? So they're working across commodities, cooking oil, FMCG, general merchandise, electronics, and so on. So they're doing a wide variety of things. And I don't think that like anyone has built out their GMV and their gross margin structure as efficiently as we have. So again, like like with maybe like 6 or 7 millions outlay, we have built like like a 64 million ARR kind of like company. And again, we've compared our gross margins to everyone in the sector, and like given the choices we've made, again, like no one has started off like this part of the journey with the gross margin structure that we are at. Of course there are like the older players, right? Like, so if you take like a best price, or if you take like a Metro Cash and Carry, I think they of course had like profitable stores, they had like top line and profit after tax. So I think those are our like ideals and our models. For us over there, the question was that like these are like mega warehouse models, and people still have to like figure out transportation and come over there. They have to lose a day of earning. What is that worth to them? Also, this is still like 10,000 SKU kind of like model, where to some extent you're hoping people will come and like pick out their preferences themselves. Can we actually change that with like even more like even more like micro aggregated like assortment like prediction? And we do all of those things, right? So we operate again at almost half the holding inventory on hand holding period of like like a typical like Metro Cash and Carry or like a Walmart. Or and again, like I think most of our like competitors are like at much higher like inventory days on hand. We operate at like 12 to 13 days. So we are very clear from the first day that like modern wholesale is all about understanding pricing, assortment, building a relationship with the brand where you provide the clear value prop to them. So we are like I said, we are not manufacturers. We are never trying to set price in a market. We You'll never find us like liquidating a stock and saying हमारा बिक नहीं रहा है, हम इसको अब like 50% में निकाल देंगे, हमें customers चाहिए 1 रुपए पे बेच देते हैं. Like these are all things like it's basically you're taking someone else's brand equity and you're like lighting fire to it to like get customers. So we kind of like understand that, because like my co-founder is from retail, right? So Manish is like from retail. He's like spent 25 years working with these people. He's also been a salesperson. Many of the people who are like in our team right now have been brand managers, and they they've built these brands up. So I think like like the pain of a marketplace, that it needs to offer value to both sides, has always been very evident to us from day one. And so we've always been very balanced. So we're not saying like कि अच्छा retailer को खुश करना है, like let's give the cheapest price possible and like let's just subsidize with like VC money. Like sure, like, and and the idea of course was like it came from B2C playbook, right?
Yeah.
That you do this, you win the customer's loyalty, they see your service, they fall in love with it, they stay with you. In India, that's just not worked out so far, is where it is, right? So again, we were also lucky. I think we came later, so we saw what had not worked for others, right? So we never started off thinking ki you have to replicate this playbook which has worked in like to some extent in B2C. So I think like again, like multiple things kind of like come together. So for us, like building a clear value prop for brand, for customer equally is very important.
So, are you also choosing markets consciously that there is lesser competition, or you not that is not a factor at all?
That strategy, right? That strategy to say like like when you're like a smaller company and like we have raised less than everyone else, right? So again, like I said, so at the time, so at this point that we are at it, like as I said, 64 million like ARR. At this point, like like a competition had raised like 40 million, like back in 20, 100 million back like 1 year ago, and so on. And we've kind of like, so like I said, we've been lucky that we've come after other people and seen their mistakes. We've also been unlucky in the sense that people first ask, there's already four players here. And second part, like the market is much harder, right? Like,
Yes.
so everyone like fundraising now, whether they are in FMCG or they are like in like SaaS, everyone has a relatively harder time. So we've had that. But again, the point being, right, that like given that we have had this like constraint, we've never tried to like buy our way to any kind of loyalty, buy our way to any kind of like retention and so on.
Right. Actually, why I'm so curious about it is because generally it's a very counterintuitive choice in that sense, right? Because
Right.
yes, there is a problem, but then there are players which are kind of already have taken a plunge into this, and these are like reasonably good number of players and reasonably
Yeah.
big players. So I'm actually very very curious to know what were the aspects that you thought have not been solved, that you are particularly looking to solve and then kind of create a place for yourself. So
Yeah, so it didn't exactly happen like that, right? It was kind of more like we were led by our nose. So I started off trying to do a group buying and selling business. I tried many things by that. I tried to sell like health insurance, mangoes, fruits and veggies, everything like, and and other people by the way have gone on to make some of these models work, right? So that has also been interesting for me to like learn and understand. But again, my point is that we started trying to do group selling, and no one was really doing like branded goods in group selling, right? So we're like, why can't you sell like prestige cooker or like like an XYZ baby care within like these groups? So that's what we're trying to do. Now instead of like that model taking off, for whatever reason what took off was that like they were like traders and retailers, from these India to India 3 like cities and towns, who were like buying from us. And
Okay.
they were like, kind of like very aggressively telling us, why don't you deliver more, why don't you increase assortment, why are you not available in my pin code? So you're delivering here, my brother is only like 40 kilometers away, why can't you deliver there? So it's more like, we were doing like a set of activities, and the customer who was most interested in us was this, like retailer category. And that's when we actually started to explore. I started out with the same kind of like, assumption that like distribution of FMCG is largely a solved problem for retailers. I was just trying to say, is there like a, like a income addition that we can do to micro resellers, and then therefore like get more resellers onto our platform? It was more from that angle. So it was like, it was totally different play. But then when we saw the customer, we saw the response, we talked to them, we went deeper, and we realized कि जो हमें लगता था वो actually है नहीं, right? So take something like, health drinks, malted health drinks, Horlicks, Boost, Bonvita. All of us know them. They've been ads forever. Cricket में advertise होता है. Cricket advertising is like kind of like, everyone in India must have seen it more or less, right? Now, so you would think that, these products will not have distribution problems. Like 6 kilometers, 6 hours drive away from Delhi, you will not get the same margin on these products as you would get in Delhi. And when you say like will not get the same price, I mean 40%, 50% income difference. It's like, like Manjari, someone telling you कि तुम यहाँ पे काम कर रही हो, तुम्हें like, like कि 1 लाख मिलेगा, तुम 6 घंटे दूर जाकर के रहो, तुम्हें वहां पे 50,000 मिलेगा.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
there is this like random expectation, right? But why? Because what is it about your work that is different? What is it about the consumption that's different? Are people consuming less margin items? And by the way, like that's the idea that, we have about tier 2, tier 3 India. No, people are aspirational. They are willing to buy larger packs. They're willing to buy like, better products. They don't want fakes. They don't want damages. So aspiration and ability to pay bhi hai. But of course, ability to pay is even more in urban, right? So I think like India ka wo ek hai ki, there's a very large opportunity right at the top, which is the only opportunity that people seem to be building for.
Right. And in terms of your supply chain, what are the key efficiency drivers that you've been able to build out? What's been working out for you for these better margins?
I think like, being very supply and very finance minded from the first day. So again, like, having like multiple sources of capital for your like working capital. One, like, like keeping working capital, important from day one, having a focus on it, finding different sources for it. Then two, like, like having a very good understanding of like assortment by area. Some of the earliest we did in our like, like data and prediction models was also like, how do we actually like, like understand like an area's assortment better before, and like, like before too much investment is required. We've always like worked a lot on like our own inventory system. So we built our own inventory system using open source software. We built our own prediction models for like assortment, customer preference, pricing, suggested stock transfers. All of this, like, we've like invested a lot of like both like, human energy, and I would say like product and, like data team energy on.
Perfect, perfect. So that's great then. Uh, in terms of retention, like the retailer retention, has that been a concern? And if at all there is a churn that happens, what are the issues that you found there?
Yeah, so again, this is like one of the myths we used to hear, that if you don't sell the lower margin like, categories, you won't have any stickiness, right? And we never sold any of the lower margin categories, because we didn't think we'd ever be able to make enough money on it. And our customers are sticky. I think our path, like initially looked rougher, but now every month we are compounding, growing steadily. I think like a retention is actually like 2x of the industry norm.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think like, like we built now the right assortment, the right value proposition, and we are appealing to the right kind of person who understands, that look, we are not just about like a one-time sale or opportunistic buying. So I think over like 2 years that we've been doing this, we've got the right set of customers. So right now our retention numbers are also pretty good.
Got it. And in general, in this space, do you see retention as a problem, or like not specific to Apna Club, but generally in this space?
Yeah, we do hear, right? So we do hear. So in B2B, again, like, the other thing that like people do talk about is a transactional customer, right? And the customer like is very value sensitive. So that definitely is true. I think like, as a business, you have to make sure, it's not like your choice to buy something more expensive, or something like suited to your taste. Because you're making decisions on behalf of others, you are forced to be more transactional also in many ways, right?
Right.
So yeah, so this is definitely like something that all B2B businesses, and 100% SMB, so chota business, that SMB like tech wala या SME business wala जो sector है, like retention is a major challenge.
Right, right. So then what happened? Do they go back to the existing wholesalers that they were earlier working with, or maybe some other players is, and this competition kind of uh, ruining it for everybody?
No, I don't think so, right? I mean, like all good businessmen, they like to maintain multiple relationships, right? I think like if they see someone selling goods at like a loss, I think they will obviously like go into opportunity buying over there. But opportunity, see, I think like the fascinating thing about FMCG is you need to be very consistent with your execution, right? And what I mean is, if you're eating a biscuit today, you're eating a biscuit today. If you didn't get this biscuit today, you didn't eat it today. So it's not like kal you will eat two biscuits. So it's kind of like like your the consumption is like very micro, it's very distributed, and like kind of like very consistently and reliably being there is like the most important thing. So what we think we find is that retailers are happy to have like a mix of people like providing them services. And yeah, like like if you want to win their loyalty over, then you have to exist, you have to be there and be fair to them for like a year at a time. Now we see like like places that we've been there for like 12 months, 13 months. There people have kind of like suddenly you feel like there's a step change in the relationship, and it comes both ways, right? So like after 1 year they're like "Ye credit ka hai hamara, एक साल से खरीद रहे हैं." So there's also that, but there's also this, right? Like where they're like, "Acha, like I need this, make sure it happens. I've been waiting for a long time for you, like get this right." So the relationship changes. I think like all good businessmen, they're like, "You are a good service provider. Let me tell you how you can help me better so that you stay there for 20 years."
Yeah, yeah, right. Makes sense. ठीक है. So maybe a message for budding entrepreneurs.
Right.
That would be very helpful for people who are gonna watch this
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I think like that's also the reason why I like to like angel invest. I like to see like what different strategies are that people have for kind of like building something successful. And I think like just kind of like being like super honest with yourself, like like never fool yourself. And like yeah, like just like like resilience is required, right? So I've just seen like I feel like like in like 2 or 3 years of like doing a startup, I've seen so much. There's so many ups, there's so many downs. Today you feel like you're doing amazing, and then tomorrow like um, Reliance has announced that they are going to enter your sector, whatever. Like these are the typical things that happen. We actually went the opposite way. We were like, "Yeah, hum Reliance ke sector mein jayenge." But still, I mean, I think startup as a journey is like just like very full of ups and downs. That's what makes it exciting.
Mm-hmm.
But so if you're starting off, right, like just be like super resilient and like be very honest to yourself. Have good, mental health support around you, supportive partner, supportive like social structure, supportive financial structure, right? Don't jump into this if you have debt. So I think like those are the things that I would advise people on. Like do this because it's going to be fun. Because I don't think even now I'm clear कि पैसा बन जाएगा कि नहीं बन जाएगा. Having a great time, building something useful. I think those are the things that you can be doing.
Right, right. And any pointers on how to decide an idea and how to decide a particular market? I mean, apart from
Right.
just the sheer passion of building something, any thoughts
Yeah.
on that as well?
And so I think like, like I'm not like a very typical founder, like I didn't do this out of deep interest. Like I started off in travel and I pivoted, right? When I was looking to stay alive through COVID. And so I actually now have a thesis ki you don't need to be passionate about, your sector or problem, but you should care about it. Like once you like, so, when I was shutting like travel down, why didn't I go into crypto? Why didn't I go into like, like whatever, something that's hot?
Hmm.
So I think because day in day out you have to live with it, it should be something that makes sense to you, something that you care about. For me, at the end of the day, the idea, right? So I am like, so my family, so again, like my dad is in the government services. As kind of like education, like kind of like brought us out of like pretty low income like background. And so for me, the idea is that like first education does this, for you as a family. Then I think like kind of like VC gave me this very democratized access to large capital to build something. I think like that opportunity is always missing in India, right? India may, how do you move ahead? If you're like progressive, if you're hardworking, how do you create value for yourself? How do you like, change like kind of like, like your entire circumstances? I think the American dream, but for India, right? I think that I found very exciting. And so that's why for me from the beginning, the idea of working with a small entrepreneur has been like especially meaningful. So I think you need to do that. You need to find, I don't think there's a sector you need to find, but you need to find something you care about as an outcome and just see if this works towards that.
Right, right, right. So then this brings me to the other few points that I wanted to discuss about investing, and
Right.
because you've been an early member at Misfits community as well.
Yeah.
So when did you start your investing journey? I know that you worked with an impact investing firm earlier, and
Yeah.
that would have given you definitely some good understanding about how to look at it. Can you share that
Yeah.
some of that with us, and how did you get into it? And yeah.
Yeah. I honestly think that I am a better entrepreneur than I was an investor. And I think that's because like my mindset is like how do you make that possible? Right? Or can this happen? And what would the world look like if it happened? So I'm not very good at like saying no to things, right? So my struggle also when I'm like investing or angel investing is like, like how do you say no to someone who's so excited about something? So even now, for example, like my style of investing is very clearly like founder driven. I think I like, and then it fits with like the stage I get to invest at, right, which is like very early stages. I think my first investment was into like my friend from IIT Delhi. He was starting a logistics services company, and I remember I think I had savings of like some like whatever 7 or 8 lakhs, and I was like, and I put 5 lakhs into like his company, right? And I mean, like that's not like a advisable thing to do, but like I just like I could see that like I thought he was great. He had and has great energy,
Uh-huh.
and like I just felt like I can see where this is going, and I was
Yeah.
like I want to be part of it, right? And he also wanted me to be part of it, which is like the best deals are quite often as a like I think honestly as an angel your challenge is like you may want to be part of the deal. Why should the deal want you to be part of it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so again like both things worked out. So again I think as an investor like I had frameworks, right? But like more than frameworks I think I like partners who are very good at like understanding and filtering and saying no.
Huh.
But for me, what I have always been good at is like finding people that I'm excited by, finding ideas that I'm excited by, and then again like excitement is fine, but then don't fool yourself with the performance, right?
Hmm.
Being very clear sighted. अच्छा ये कहा था करेंगे, ये हुआ है, is this good, is this bad? Like
Hmm.
and I think like one of the things you need to realize is if you think you will do X, then you do 2X. That also is actually like a concerning thing, because you need to know why you were able to overachieve. Yeah, to matlab, you didn't understand the first step, or something very good happened which was not fully within your control. So again, my point is that like I think like a lot of excitement, passion, a good founder like kind of mindset. I think that's what I go after, and then like kind of like being like very clear sighted. Excitement is there, was there. How's the performance? Is there clarity? Do people understand what they're working on? Are they
Hmm.
faffing? I hate it when people are faffing, right?
Hmm.
So, and like I think that's the way I have parsed it out for myself.
Got it. Got it. And considering where the tech industry is right now with the recent layoffs, etc., the market
Yeah.
has definitely shifted. So, do you how do you see this time for investing in startups?
I think it's a good time to invest, right? Like, look, I am an angel investor. It's a good time for me to invest. I have always been an individual willing to, accept a great amount of risk for my return. So at the time, the money was abundant. Money was also cheap, and like वो अलग time था. So like your interest rate in the bank was like whatever 3%. So that cheap money was there, and people are getting it. I think today money is like better priced. As a founder, I feel the pain of it, but I also feel like like it like I think there needs to be like a little bit more clarity in the market. I don't think itna paisa hona chahiye. There should also be I think like a good sense of like whether this is the right stage for you to invest. So again I think like this helps at least investors like me to find more opportunities, to find them at a stage that they want to take my kind of like money. And it's still and therefore then it is also like a stage when I can add value to them. Look, if you raise like like 10 million in your whatever seed stage, you don't need to like you don't need me to like teach you anything. You hire the best people, go out and build it, right? And then the the expectation that 10 million also can't be कि ऐसे वो 50% return आ जाएगा. I think cheap money is going after a lot of ideas that are never going to return more than like like I don't know like 10%, 12%, 15% yearly. So I think that structural clarity needs to be there. But now I think like kind of like this helps. I think like there's more um, there's more like clarity of vision अब कि किस चीज में कितना पैसा जाना चाहिए and what is the value you add by making this happen.
Right. So now, over a period of time, have you now been able to kind of build some preference towards certain sectors you think are more maybe attractive than the rest, or maybe certain sectors that you would want to kind of avoid? Um,
No, I honestly, like I said, right, like I think like I have a preference for a certain kind of like founder. There are people, who excite me, and their vision excites me, and so I have done investments in gaming. I've done investments in like e-commerce. I've done investments in logistics, as I said. So I think like kind of like in terms of business structure, they're quite different.
yeah.
But the thing that I have found exciting across all of them is the founders are like very capable individuals. They're very good people. They have clarity of thought and vision, or they have perseverance, right? They're not the kind of people who will give up at any point. So I think that's how I have built my portfolio out. Yes, if I feel that something is not well structured business wise and I understand that business, then
Hmm.
I don't invest into it. If I don't understand business, I ask someone who's worked in the business, oh, what are the factors to look at? So that's how I do it.
Right. 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 Any considerations or suggestions you would like to give to folks who are starting to angel invest, begin
Yeah.
their journey with that?
I don't think I think I have like a biased outlook on this because I got lucky with my first bet. Then I got lucky with starting up myself, right? So I'm a biased entity as far as it goes. But I think like, you should angel invest if you like, like seeing people who are like writing the future, right? And that's the idea. I
Hmm.
honestly see these people, building these huge teams and like changing how people are working on certain problems. I think that's really exciting. I feel like it elevates my thinking. I feel like it elevates my vision of what the future will look like, and that's why I do it. And of course I received help, right? So I got like a bunch of angel money. I got a bunch of like advice, even if not money. So part of me like doing this is what I understand, I am happy to give back. So the time invested in me, I'm happy to give back to people coming after me.
Right. Perfect. Okay. I think yeah. So it was. I think it was great to kind of get your perspective on both Apna Club, the B2B market space, and also how you're looking at investing. You've been an investor with us at Misfits, so
Right.
great to have this conversation with you, Shruti, and thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, no, thanks, Manjari. I love the idea of the Misfits community, right? I think finding the right founders is kind of like where it comes from. And so, like, like network driven, like opportunities, like, so smart people bringing smart people in. I think that when I saw this itself, I was like, oh, this is exciting. I have to try it. So, yeah, thanks for having me. And, looking forward to seeing what else comes up in the community.
Sure, sure. Okay.
Right.
All right. Thank you so much, Shruti.
Thanks.